And the second fear is I keep looking down and seeing this and thinking, is it alive? What I'd like to say as well is during lockdown, and I think I did say this when I visited you in person, was it last September or sometime? I watched a lot of online services. Can I commend you, because what I thought you did was excellent. I thought it was clear, it was compact, it was well done, and having seen a few that were quite cringeworthy, I did say to a few churches, you ought to look at what Chippenham are doing. The other thing was, I think it gave several people who didn't have a lot of opportunity before, the opportunity to do things, which you did really well, and the kids did so well. So can I thank you for that? Because I would listen when I could at 10:30, and found it excellent, really helpful. I mean, what else can you say about COVID? We've said it all. But one of the questions it's raised with me is, sorry, if I keep walking around.
No, you're fine.
You walk however you need to do.
Yeah. One question that it raised with me several times is, with all the change that's happening, what is constant and what isn't? And how can I cope with all the changes that are happening? And my answer has been by finding what is constant in my life. And a couple of verses have triggered this for me. One is, and again, I could well have said this when I came last time, so apologies. A couple of years ago, a friend of mine asked me if I'd speak at his church on parables. So I said, Steve, I'd be very happy to do that. But 2 years ago, you asked me to do the church weekend on parables. And said, they've heard everything I've got to say in parables. I said, don't worry, Dave, they won't remember that. So if I said this before and you remember, apologies. In Hebrews chapter 12, right at the end of the chapter, it says that God is going to shake everything that can be shaken until something unshakable remains. And he says, seeing as we have an unshakable kingdom, let's press on. And we have been through shaking at every level. And the other verse that, again, a well-known verse, much used during this time, in the book of Lamentations, and the book is named because that's what it is Jeremiah moaning, life is bad. But then in chapter 3, at verse 22, he says, one thing I know, that your mercy is new every morning, your faithfulness, your love. And here he is, for him, his whole world is being shaken. Everything is precarious. But he wakes up each morning thinking there is something constant in my life. And that's God's love. And I try to hold on to those verses because, like you, like the church, like society, everything has been shaken. And sometimes we haven't known whether we're coming or going, what it's all about. And God says, in the midst of this shaking, it will shake some things off, but let's find out that which is unshakable. So let's look briefly at a few things that are unshakable, because relationships have changed at lots of levels. A friend of mine, he had to shield because of heart problems, and as soon as he could, he saw his grandchildren. He got a 2-year-old granddaughter who he hadn't seen for 15 months, and he was so excited. And when she came and saw him, she screamed, cried, and ran away. And you can understand. Go and give Granddad a hug, and she didn't know him. And that relationship was painful. I think for many, mental health had been affected. And you know as well as I do that the incidence of depression, of anxiety, has increased. And that is understandable. But we've changed. Loneliness. Lots of people I've heard had to shield and just missed the connection. And in the connection of touching, It's always funny when you come, do you? Touch but for many people, that is a big thing because the touch is a connection. And lots of people have lost that. It's just to show I have got notes. I might not look at them much, but we have become disoriented. How we live has changed. Probably how you work has changed. I know, just talking to Rosie at the start, how she's worked has changed. We all have. Our finances have changed. And we seem to have the two extremes. I'm technically self-employed. I filled in my tax forms. Now, normally I would spend up to £4,000 on petrol. So last year, when I filled in my form, it was £900. It's changed, and I've saved a lot of money. But I've got many friends who are struggling to know how will they manage. And as I said earlier, the need of food banks has just accelerated. So we live with that disorientation. And how we do church has changed. Not just because we've had to adapt to do church online, but I know for you, some people have moved on and moved away. And because we haven't been able to meet face to face, you think, that's just happened and we feel disconnected. And it is painful. And I know from my own experience that when people do move away from church, it's painful for them, but it's equally as painful for those that they've left. And so we're going through all those sorts of dynamics, which is very hard. So let's briefly just think about some things that change and some things that don't change. One thing that I've come to see is that our hope is constant, but our hopes aren't. I hope England beat Croatia. I hope that things will be lifted on the 21st. We have all these hopes, but those change. And sometimes even during this pandemic, we've hoped for something, and we understand why the writer of Proverbs said, hope deferred makes the heart sick. Because you thought you'd be able to see the family. You thought you'd be able to go to Spain or Portugal, and suddenly you can't. And our hopes vary. But one thing we need to stand firm on is we have a hope that is greater than the hopes that shape us. And for you and me, our anchor is, our hope is in God. Our hope is in the kingdom. Our hope is in that everything is being shaken, but there's something unshakable. And you and I have within us an unshakable kingdom and an unshakable friend. And sometimes when our hopes are dissipating, we need to just pause and hold on to that. I think for you as a church, your vision is constant. But how you get there changes. I was telling Tony, I met with Tony's brother Chris in Cardiff on Friday, and we live on the A38, if you know Bristol, just about a mile off the M4, M5, so we know what Fridays are like. So we left Cardiff early to come back, driving along, and they said, there's an overturned caravan at the Almondsbury interchange. Where do I get up? Almondsbury interchange. So I thought, well, which ways can I go? So I thought I could go this way, and then they said the M5 down to Cornwall and the 49 is gridlocked. Now, my destination, my vision, my aspiration was the same, but I had to do all these mental undertakings to say, I've got to do it another way. And what I think we will find as church is your vision. Your vision, as we prayed for a kingdom to come, your vision for Wiltshire, that I believe is constant. But sometimes the way that we get there might change. And I eventually got home. I didn't go the most direct way. It seemed long. It took an hour longer than going the other way. But I got there in the end because my destination, my vision, where I wanted to end up was constant. But circumstances made me do all different sorts of things. I've been really impressed by what you've done with Open Blue. And I think Open Blue has that real potential to bring something of God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. Now, with the changes, the outworking of that might change. But that's circumstantial, the vision is the same. So my prayer for us is that we keep a constant vision of what God wants to do. Because the vision doesn't change, but sometimes we have to take different routes to get there. If you were to ask me what my vision for the church, I think it is constant. I know often people used to say to us, we don't know the vision of the church. One year we spent the first 8 Sundays talking about, each of the leaders spoke about our vision for the church. And within 2 weeks people were saying, we don't know the vision of the church. It happens. But our vision in general terms is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, mind and strength, and our neighbours as ourselves. To go into the whole world, which may be India, but it may be Morrison's up near the motorway, it may be the neighbourhood. Go into the whole world and make disciples. And it is to bring something of God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. If you were to ask me to sum up in one sentence, what is the purpose of the church? I think I'd say it's to bring God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven. And those things stay constant. And maybe we've now got to ask, well, how do I appropriate that? Because the circumstances have changed. I might have to take a different route from the one that I had set my mind on. But am I willing enough to be flexible because the vision hasn't changed, just how I access it is. The other thing, which I realise this holds no theological depth, the next thing I'm going to say. So if we've got any theologians here, anybody with a PhD in theology, I'm wrong theologically, right? Now, Jesus never changes. But I've got this feeling that Jesus has grown old with me. I was asked by a church last week if I could go and speak on meeting Jesus, how we meet Jesus, which I wasn't able to do because I'm elsewhere. And I thought, well, how do I meet Jesus? And what I realised is when I was young, even younger, when I was young and then before, I had a gung-ho Jesus. Because I was really gung-ho and Jesus met my needs. I'm now a lot older and have had to face, like many of you have, cancer, breakup in family, heartache, disappointment. Now, the Jesus I know now, I know he never changes, but he's a different Jesus. Because he's a Jesus who understands. He's a Jesus who gets alongside. So I sort of wrestled with, has Jesus changed or have I changed? But what I know is Jesus is constant. But what I've discovered is that I know so little of Jesus. Is that as my experience and my circumstances broaden and expand, so my understanding of Jesus has expanded. And Jesus has met us at times of crisis, which 30, 40 years ago, I never believed we would have. Because mine was the gung-ho Jesus. The Jesus going into battle. And that's the Jesus who gets alongside us, who can't take in disappointment. And I think for some of us, as we've processed lockdown with all of its difficulties, sometimes it's just a case of saying, Jesus, I want my understanding of you to be so broadened that I meet you where I am. In the Old Testament, when Moses encountered God and he said, who are you? Who shall I tell people that you are? And God said, I am who I am. And I think literally that means I will be who I will be. And I think what I've discovered at this stage of my life is that Jesus, who never changes, will be something different from me at this stage than the Jesus I encountered years ago. Now, as I said, that's probably not theological. You could pick holes in that. But to get what I'm trying to say, I need my understanding of Jesus to enlarge so that his constant love and grace can meet me where I am now. And as I said, I, like some of you, had cancer battles, had cancer surgery. It was never going to happen to me. I'm a child of God. And it did. We probably know people who battled with the COVID. God, you will protect us. And it did. And suddenly, we've got to rediscover who Jesus is, because He is constant in it all. And part of that consistency is waking up every morning and saying, Lord, new every morning is your life. So, what have I learned? I've learned that in spite and because of all that's gone on, nothing can separate me from God's love. And if you, as many of us will have, felt confused, disoriented, depressed, frustrated, if you're an extrovert, you will have been stir crazy during lockdown. If you're an introvert, you probably thought this is but so is he the introvert or the extrovert?
He loved it.
Yeah. And even sometimes just understanding how we all relate differently helps us as church to understand each other. Because for those of you who didn't cope, you think, here's Roy, he loved it. What's wrong with him? Nothing's wrong with him. And he looks at you saying, oh, I need people. You think, get a life. You know? But we change. As a group, we vary, but there's one consistent thing. So just as I finish, let me just ask questions. How have you changed during lockdown? What has changed in you for the better? Now, what I've loved about many churches like this, and I feel really privileged to be part of your WhatsApp group. I don't involve much in it, but I do read everything. Is I think, well, here are people communicating more than probably if we just carried on meeting as we always did. So we've got a WhatsApp group. It's not a big group, but every day people are sharing hearts and joys and blessing, and you think that has been really good. It would be so easy just to revert to what we always used to do, and we would have lost something. We would have lost the dynamic and involvement. And I know during WhatsApp, I sense different people have just felt apart. This is where I belong. This is where I can voice something. And I think for us in church, the challenge will be, if and as things revert to normal, how can we make sure we don't lose what has been beneficial? But how have you changed as an individual? I hope there are some ways that I've improved for the good, but I know there have been some ways that haven't been for the good. And what I've been trying to do is just hold on to, in the midst of all the upheaval and the shaking, how can I hold on to that which is constant? And maybe it starts off with, if we fall into that category, just waking up tomorrow morning and saying, God, on this Monday morning, the 14th of June, your mercy is new this morning. Your everlasting love is available. And what we've got to do is find constants in this shaking scenario so that we've got something to hold on to. And if we can do that, then our hopes might dissipate, but our hope becomes more sure. And we will know that nothing can separate us from God's love. Not COVID, not whether Portugal is open or closed, not whether I'll have to be at the office 3 days a week or 5 days a week. Heard somebody say the other day, work wanted him to go back to the office, which isn't unreasonable. He'd been working from home. And he thought, this isn't attacking the enemy. No, it's not. It's just life and circumstances. What can I hold on to in the midst of all this? And it's that the steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. And as he shakes something unshakable in you and me, his kingdom and his king will remain.